This week on 13th and Park, I sit down with former White House senior advisor May Davis Mailman, a rising star who's gone from modest Kansas roots to helping shape and drive national policy in the West Wing. We talk about what really happens behind the scenes at the White House, the issues she's most passionate about, and the values that guide her work. You're not going to want to miss this conversation. Insightful, real, and straight from the heart of Washington. From Ballard Studios in the nation's capital, it's 13th and Park.
The hard things that are necessary, we either do it or we'll pay the price down the road.
That often is missing in politics.
We have to solve everything.
It's a nightmare.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
I have faith in the American people.
Those are the facts.
The Illuminati, right there. Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
What's in this tea?
Well, May, welcome to 13th and Park. It looks like, again, a film studio behind you. And coming from the film industry, I'm loving every piece of this.
Yeah, this is my at-home studio. It gets a little bit of use, a little bit more and more these days, but, we'll see where it goes.
One of the things, obviously, that's been under the microscope a lot has been higher education in America. It's no secret that a lot of people in America believe there is a liberal bias in higher education that has led to what we've seen in terms of rising anti-Semitism, the tolerance of transgender athletes in women's sports. And you helped, when you were there in the White House, craft what's known, I guess, as the playbook, working in the Columbia University issue that is maybe a model for the way this administration wants to address higher education, wants higher education to change moving forward. Can you talk about that? What is kind of the Columbia University playbook? Why this is so important to be going after right now, and why it's going to make a fundamental difference for America?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of aspects to address. And one is a little bit values neutral, which is just the sheer amount of money going to research that is not useful or helpful and has extremely high overhead rates to universities with enormous endowments. So as we're thinking about a $36 trillion deficit, and as we're thinking about where the priorities for the US government are, it makes sense to spend money on public institution research or even private institution research, but it also makes sense to assess that every once in a while and making sure it's being used right. So that's a values neutral, just like good government. And I think a lot of universities bristle at this idea that there should be some additional oversight, or that their overhead amounts should be reduced, or that certain types of funding is not useful. It's not going to result in anything that Americans are going to be able to use. But then I think there's another piece of it, which is, what are the values that universities are inculcating in our future leaders? Because the US government does have a very huge interest in what our future leaders look like and what they carry with them, and whether they have resiliency, whether they are open to alternative viewpoints, whether they're good people, whether they share American values. And for a long time, I think there was this slow deterioration in universities. And it's not that anybody in the Trump administration wants to actually go run the universities and tell them what they should or shouldn't teach or micromanage them. But I think a lot of the root of the things that you're seeing, whether it's anti-Semitism, what people call affirmative action, but racial discrimination, those types of things, all come down to racial hierarchies and other oppressor-oppressed hierarchies that are on campus. And if you can take those away, then actually you don't have an anti-Semitism problem, because you're not treating people differently based on where they lie on that oppressor-oppressed or sort of victim or non-victim status. And so same thing with affirmative action. And I think a lot of the ills, sort of the victimhood status, I think, remember a lot of people after Brett Kavanaugh became a Supreme Court justice, they had coloring rooms for kids and they had places for you to weep and stuff like that. Things happen in this world that are tough and that you do not agree with. And for people to always be glorifying this victimhood in many different ways, I think is really toxic for our society. So that's some of the things that we're addressing, is really this racial and sex-based hierarchies that are against, obviously, federal law, but certainly not in the government's priority to fund. We're not, even if it happens, we're not going to be behind funding that.
So let's talk about the issue of transgender athletes in women's sports. You know very well the situation with Leah Thomas at the University of Pennsylvania. We had Riley Gaines on the show talking about her experience with that. Why is this such a difficult issue? Despite polls that show a clear majority of Americans just think that's not fair. Why are Democrats having such a difficult time coming to grips with that and acknowledging that's not only an issue, but that's something that just isn't right?
I mean, you're right with the polling that if you ask Americans, do they think a man should be in women's sports, they will say no. And yet you still see basically half of states saying that this should be the case, even though entities like the NCAA have said, no, you have to have sex-based sports. I think the issue is a couple of things. One is a visceral opposition to anything that Trump is for, I must be against.
Okay.
So that makes it not a trans or female specific issue. It's like an evergreen issue. And then I think the other is just self-identification. In the United States, we've become a lot more lonely. We've become a lot more independent. We've become less religious. Our communities don't gather in the way that they used to. And so the associations that we have are not with our neighbors. And so we identify as our national party affiliation. And so part of that national party really was defending this idea that men should be in women's sports spaces, prisons. And so if that's who you are, if that's endemic to like your being, your identity, your group association, you can't just take it out. It's part of who you are.
Right.
And so changing something that's that central to you, which is like a tenet of your party, I think is much easier said than done.
Another thing that you've been addressing, the Higher Education Act, Section 117. There's been a lot of concern about federal money coming into higher education and the influence that's having on things that are happening, especially in terms of research, and where that knowledge and that research ultimately is going. Talk about why that is really a national security issue and what we need to do about it.
So I think there's a reason why you saw a lot of very discriminatory and violent outbreaks happen on elite college campuses and not every college campus. It's not like some problem that's, because young people or because the internet or something like that. There are things that elite universities are doing that are embedding some sort of student body or some sort of value or some sort of teaching. And that's not organic. It's not like organically everybody decided that they were going to become anti-Semites.
Right.
When you look at where the money is coming from and the types of programs, they fund specific teachers, fund specific curriculums, centers, foreign exchange programs, all of these sorts of things with countries and with entities that do not share our values as Americans. And we've gotten this idea that there's something negative about requiring sort of United States values. But actually, that was the whole point of the foreign exchange student program.
Yeah.
It was not to have some sort of worker influx into the United States. It was to take people from foreign countries, put them in the United States, have them learn a foreign exchange program, learn about American values, and then take those American values and spread them throughout the world so that you would have other people who appreciated America. And we've kind of forgotten that. And these universities are actually trying to import other ideas. It's like the opposite of what foreign student programs are supposed to be.
So let's shift ground for a second. So you were born in the South, raised in the Midwest, and at least you finished your education in the East, not ignoring the University of Kansas. Go Jayhawks, right? That's given you kind of a panoply of experiences in different parts of America. Do you think that's maybe helped you, May, understand better how to navigate around some of the hot button issues that, tend to divide this country now more than ever than unite us?
I think that's part of it. I also, I grew up in a very rural Kansas community, and my family, being Asian, were a little bit different. So it always felt a little bit like I didn't blend.
Yeah.
And then having lived everywhere, you get to be a person who kind of senses the room a little bit more quickly. And so I'll never be as good as President Trump, who really knows how to make people feel welcome. Like, he's a natural host. And I try to be more like, do I understand the situation I'm getting myself into? And I think being not like my peers, maybe growing up, those sorts of things have helped me be maybe more perceptive. And I would say being in the White House, that skill set is extremely important because you're dealing with all of these agencies. Everybody has a different personality. Everybody has had a different experience. And the White House has to coordinate all these people. And some of them are more senior than you. Some of them are more junior than you. And so you have to quickly understand where people are coming from in order, I think, to build a team and then get a policy ready for the president's consideration.
Some of these things that you experienced, especially in the last 6 months, where you're coming to the table and it's a highly charged atmosphere, the fact that even people on the other side of the table found you to be open and reasonable. I mean, you're still determined and you're driving for what you think is right, but it's not with a sense of certitude that sometimes can take negotiations from being a two-way conversation as opposed to a one-way.
Yeah, well, I really just try and make sure that I'm accomplishing the president's objective, and the president is a reasonable person. I think this is one of the most misunderstood things, is that the president is going to come in there and he's going to do all this stuff. This is why he jokes he's going to be a dictator on day one, because it's actually just the opposite of his personality. He wants to learn. He wants to understand. He wants to make a deal. He wants to make people who are very different than him feel welcome around him. And so his staff need to channel that. And if you're pursuing some sort of personal gain, something like that, that I think makes people unreasonable. But if you go into something of, I just want to get what the president wants to get done, the president is the reasonable person.
But I hear he's a great listener. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And it's not because he doesn't have an opinion. He absolutely does. But him having that opinion does not prevent him from ensuring it's the right opinion by hearing other people out.
What's it like kind of day to day? What's that experience like? And was it exactly what you thought it would be like when you were growing up in Kansas?
It's hard to have that moment to stop and realize, because it's so funny how quickly human beings adapt to their new normal. And then things just become routine. But I was in the first van going into the White House. They put you in a different location. They take you in a mini motorcade into the White House. And so first van for both the first administration and the second administration. My most relevant job experience was being a sixth grade teacher, because it is just trying to herd cats. You have so many different agencies, so many different priorities. You've got stuff bubbling down from the president, and then you've got stuff bubbling down from the bottom, stuff coming in from the news. So you're just getting bombarded. And then not only that, you have to give the agencies enough leeway to do their jobs, but not so much leeway that you have no idea what's happening and you're learning about everything that they're doing in the news. It is actually shocking to me that there has never been a female chief of staff before Susie Wiles.
Before Susie.
Because it is a highly organized, high EQ-centric job, I think, being not only the chief of staff, but every sort of job in the White House, because you are not on behalf of yourself. You are not a principal. You are trying to make sure that the number one principal and then all of the other sub principals going on in the administration have what they need. And it's a very difficult role. But I do think it's hard to stop and say, wow, that was really cool. Because as soon as you're done with one thing, you look at your to-do list and you haven't made any progress. Checking that big major thing off, and it was front page of the Wall Street. It doesn't even matter. It's like on to the next thing. So it's hard to be reflective, but it is sad when you leave. I think that's when most people are reflective, is as they're turning in their badge and they leave and you think, I'll never do anything like this again.
Right.
But then sometimes you do.
You remember the television show West Wing, right? I mean, a lot of us grew up, watching that. And now suddenly you're in the West Wing and you're one of the most trusted advisors. What does it take to develop that trust? How do you get to that point where everyone looks at someone like May Davis Mailman and says, I trust where she's coming from on this issue?
Yeah. So I think some people emphasize title and perception, and those people don't last long. And some people just prioritize keeping their head down. And I think that's how you develop trust, because there are a lot of opportunities to become famous working in the West Wing. You can steal credit from other people. You can tweet about things that you didn't really do. You can go to Rose Garden events and present yourself as the face of something. So you can do all these things to elevate yourself and to sort of feel like you've generated that trust. But I felt like people who did the exact opposite are the ones who had that trust. And that type of person, you might not know their name, but those people exist in the White House, and those are the people running the White House, because I'm not going to bring somebody who's going to just try and get the glory. And so those teams are built out and things are moved forward by these people you've never heard of and probably never will.
Well, you referenced Susie Wiles. So obviously she has the title of Chief of Staff. But I know Susie Wiles as you do, and she's a very behind the scenes, take no credit for thyself kind of player, always has been, by the way. And really in the true spirit of public service, serve the nation and serve the principle with everything you've got.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And we went through a lot of chief of staff who I think had their pros and cons, but a lot of them before were principals in their past life. They were the head person. And the job of the chief of staff is just so exactly the opposite. For House of Cards people, you're just like killing the people in the background.
Literally, right.
So it's not super glamorous. And I think Susie does a great job of this, where she knows that she's chief of the staff. And the reason like staff is involved in your title is because you need to know what's actually happening at the staff level. These people are layers below you. They will never go into the Oval and meet the president. And she takes the time to meet with them and know what they're doing. The White House is very isolating. You don't actually know what people are thinking or what real America is like unless you have very frequent interactions. And she's somebody who's just dedicated a ton of her time to both the staff and real America in a way that I think helps her navigate a lot of the difficult decisions that come up.
So May, of all the experiences you had in Trump 1.0 and 2.0, your favorite experience, your favorite moment, your favorite memory? I know there's so many, right?
One of my favorites was during 1.0, probably the first week or so, my first trip on Air Force One.
Oh.
And it's an old plane. You get on and it's like light leather and it's not well equipped for foreign trips. There's no beds for people. So when you do foreign trips, people are sleeping on the floor. The bathrooms like have sort of grandma's towels there where, it's nice because you don't have paper towels, but it just feels old. The whole thing feels old. But wow, is it cool. I mean, some of the little things, like there's baskets of fruit and candy wherever you walk, and the presidential seal is everywhere, and you can make a phone call to your family from the plane, and the chef makes you a meal there. So I think I'll never forget my first trip on Air Force One. And when I landed, it was the first time I actually ever saw the president up close. And I had no idea where we were. I had no idea where we're going. It was just amazing how whirlwindy the whole thing feels. And so you land and all of a sudden you're in a motorcade and then you're getting dropped off. And I'm in Mar-a-Lago. And I have no idea what Mar-a-Lago is. Is it a city? Is it a place? Is it a hotel? Like, what is this place? But it's this beautiful, very golden place. And then all of a sudden there's like the president in front of you, and he was talking to Sarah Sanders and they were trying to address some media issue, and he's just going, and then goes into his house, and it just all happened so quickly. That is something I think will stick with me forever. But there are so many great Oval Office meetings. He had the opportunity to meet my kids a few weeks ago when I left, and my youngest pointed to him and said, "Trump." And at that point, he turned to her and he was like, "Beautiful. She's a beautiful girl." I was like, "Yes." So good job, Hadley. A million great experiences, but you can kind of never forget the first really cool interaction like that.
This whole experience made you more bullish on America? I mean, I know you're in this whirlwind of activity, but at times when you could step back, even if it was for a few moments, do you feel good about where this country is now going and why?
So I do think that there will be legacy items for Trump that people did not anticipate as far as cultural changes in our institutions, in our law firms, in our universities. But we are only 6 months into this White House, and there's so much work to be done to cement in this work.
Right.
So I think looking forward to a Reconciliation 2.0 and other must-pass legislation to try and tie some permanent fixes in, I think, is important. The executive orders have been written, but what are you going to do now to ensure that those executive orders are being followed? And that is tough work. It's not glamorous work. It's not front page work. And that's the things that people are working on. So yes, there has been tremendous shift. I think the election was an Overton window shifting election, and it has allowed a lot of things that people never thought possible and a lot of changes in our institutions and in our businesses. But now comes the daily grind of following through.
Yeah.
It's a team that can definitely do it, but it's going to be 4 years of work to make these types of changes.
Well, May Davis Mailman, I appreciate all your time coming on 13th and Park. I just want to remind you of one reality. The President of the United States knows that May Davis Mailman is but one phone call away. Enjoy looking on the outside, at least for now, looking in. Your family, I'm sure, appreciates having mom closer to home. Many people who have served in the White House, in White Houses in the past, their service goes without, great public recognition or thanks. I think you really deserve both.
Well, thank you. And it was great to be on with you.